Shabbos. One of the great Chassidic masters, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, is known as Sanigorim Shal Yisrael, the defender of the Jewish people. He would always defend the what a Jew did in front of Hashem. One time, he traveled to a particular city, and as he arrived in the city in the morning, he woke up to daven, to pray Shacharis. He realized he forgot his tefillin. So anyone was ready to lend him a pair of tefillin. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says he only wears tefillin that he owns. So he wants to buy one. Well, there's nowhere to buy. There's no shops there. And there was no scribe that had a ready-made pair of tefillin to sell. The only one who could sell him was the president of the Chaver Kadisha. The Chaver Kadisha, when a person passed away in that town, they would gift the tefillin to the Chaver Kadisha, and once a year they would have a auction, and they would sell these tefillin that they was passed to them. So the Gabi in the Chaver Kadisha has tefillin, so he brings the box of tefillin that he has. I believe it. So Berditchev looks through the box and he points to a pair of tefillin. He says he wants that one. He says, okay, but the way we do it here, we have to have the auction. When people in the community heard that the great Rabbi Levi Berditchev wanted this pair of tefillin, so they thought, oh, this must be a very special pair. So there was an auction, and the price went up and up and up until it reached an exorbitant amount of 300 ruble. At which time the Gabi Chaver Kadisha said to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, I know you won't be able to afford this. I'll tell you what, we will sell it to you at a normal rate on the condition you tell us why you want this pair of tefillin. So it relates to that. Two of Rabbi Levi Berditchev's colleagues were Reb Zusha and Rabbi Elimelech, two students of the Maggid of Mezrich, colleagues of Rabbi Levi Berditchev, colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, Balatanya, Shnei Samuel of Liadi. And they had this interesting custom. They would walk around from place to place and try to help Jews return and do tshuva and become better Jews. But the way they did it was fascinating. They would come, say, into an inn and say they knew that this innkeeper was not an honest person. He quoted you a price and didn't honor it. He didn't give change or whatever, all kinds of things that were not scrupulous. So what would happen is that they would sit in the lobby within earshot of the innkeeper, and Reb Zusha would tell Rabbi Elimelech, "Oh, I've done such a terrible thing. You know, I mischarged somebody. I didn't give him change. He tells him all the things that the innkeeper does, but he's speaking it about himself. And Rabbi Elimelech says, you know, it's very serious. You have to go find the person and give back the money. He says, but I don't know who it is. And so Rabbi Elimelech would then give Reb Zusha a way to rectify his sins and tell him how he has to become a better person. When the innkeeper heard that and knew that he did it all, he would then go to Rabbi Elimelech and say, Rabbi, I have the same story, I have the same situation. What do I do to rectify it? And that way, they would be able to get someone to become better without embarrassing them, without pointing a finger at them. They would talk about themselves, and the fellow would hear. One time, they came to an inn, and it was an elderly innkeeper. And this guy had a very old pair of tefillin that he didn't check since his bar mitzvah. And he was quite old, and he didn't check it. And the question was if it was even kosher tefillin. Well, Rabbi Zusha tells Rabbi Elimelech, "Hey, what do I do? I didn't check my tefillin since my bar mitzvah, and then I opened it, and there was nothing in it. It was empty. Hey, what do I do?" And Rabbi Elimelech said to him, "You know what he needs to do." And when the innkeeper hears this, the innkeeper goes to Rabbi Elimelech, and he says to him, "You know, I'm also old. I haven't checked my tefillin since my mitzvah. I realized that." So he says, "Bring it here." They bring the tefillin, and they open it up, and there was actually wood instead of the portions that are meant to be, the portions of the Torah that are meant to be in the tefillin. It's not kosher. The guy never put on tefillin in his life. Even if he were technically put it on every day, there was no portions in it. So Rabbi Elimelech told Reb Zusha, "This is what you're going to do. You write now portions for him. Write down the portions, and we'll put it into but write it in a way with mystical intentions that it'll, so to speak, fulfill all the missed time that this guy didn't put on tefillin." Obviously, tefillin written by such a holy Jew like Zusha of Anapoli would have a huge impact. And so it was that he wrote the parchments, he put it into the boxes, he gives it to the Jew. The Jew wears it a number of times, and then he passes away. When he passes away, the tefillin goes to the Gabbai, the president of Chevra Kadisha, and that's the tefillin I am buying. We see here, it's an amazing story of how Reb Zushin and Elimelech made sure that even if they wanted to tell someone that they have to change their ways, they did it in such a way never to embarrass them. We find in this week's Torah portion a fascinating mitzvah. When the Jews were going out to war, they would have a Kohen and then a policeman speak to them, and the person in charge, a policeman, would get up and say, anyone who's betrothed a woman and hasn't married her, you should leave the battle and go home and marry her. Anyone who's built a home but hasn't dedicated it should go home and do that. Anyone who's planted a vineyard but has not yet redeemed the fruit of the 4th year, which is the first time you could eat it by redeeming it and eating the fruit and taking the money and using and eating it in Jerusalem, should go and do so. And then they continued. One who has fear and is fearful, he should also leave the battlefield. And then all these people will go and leave. Now Rashi tells us an opinion, and the Medrash says it even clearer in the Sifri. Rashi says that the people who were feared, what do they fear? According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he says they feared their sins. Because they had sins, they were afraid that they wouldn't be protected in the war. So the Torah, therefore, bundles them together. Why is it that the person who's betrothed but not married and planted a vineyard but didn't redeem it, etc., why are they able to go home? What's about the person whose wife is about to have a baby, or he has a house full of children waiting for him to come home? Why shouldn't he be able to go home? And so the Torah is telling us a fascinating teaching, that by doing it this way, the person is able to go home and not be embarrassed. The person who is afraid because of his sins is able, people will see when he goes home, the reason he's leaving is not because he's a sinner, but maybe because he's betrothed, maybe because he's planted a vineyard, maybe because he's built a home. People will think that that's the reason, so he shouldn't be embarrassed, or at least he will feel that he doesn't have to be embarrassed. Other people are leaving for very happy reasons, good reasons. That's how much the Torah takes into account. That even someone who we're saying is a sinner, so therefore he's afraid of the sins, not to embarrass them, to make sure that if we are trying to get them on the right path, even to do so in a way that is pleasant, in a way that doesn't put them in a bad light and doesn't embarrass them. So as we come to the month of Elul, when it says the king is in the field, the analogy given by Alter Rebbe is that in the month of Elul, the king goes out of the cities and with the field with us. So we're all next to the king. The Rebbe once gave a talk, and it was about somebody, didn't mention who it was, of course, who was talking down Jewish people, I think in Israel, for sins that they might have done or whatever. And he said, the Rebbe put it this way. He says, the king is in the field. It's the month of El. They're standing with these people that you are embarrassing in front of their face. That's not the way you're going to change them. And it's not a nice way to treat the beloved of the king. The king is coming to the field to these Jews. Don't tell them off in that kind of a way. And we should take this message to heart, that even if we have to tell somebody, we should do so in a way that doesn't bring great shame and embarrassment upon them. For Shabbos.